Alex.
Hey, you remember?
Good evening. I'd like to welcome you to the North Branford Planning and Zoning regular meeting for Thursday, October 4th. In attendance are regular members DeFrancisco, Sienna, Galdenzi, and Dulac. First order of business are the meeting minutes from September 20th, which we can't do because we were missing Trish on that. Maybe we could do that later, but she's running a little bit late. So the first order of business is the continuation of public hearing for application 2018-10 and 2011. Thanks, Bill.
Good evening. Good to see everyone again for night 3 of our text amendment application. As everyone may remember, we left off last time after a fairly lengthy conversation regarding percentages and the 80-20. We had already indicated, based on speaking with Town Council Barbara Schallenberg, that the place the commission could perhaps make some adjustments vis-a-vis the federal statute is in the ratio of 80-20 versus other underlying age restriction issues. And that led into a discussion over what that may want to look like. And so what I did on the heels of our last meetings, had a conference call with Carrie and Barbara, and I have developed, which they have both seen, and which is now included in front of you, 2 separate charts or tables, is I guess the best way to describe it, which provides the commission with something to look at in terms of how you may want to scale the age-restricted, called percentiles, into 2 different zones. As you know, we are talking about putting the percentiles in both the elderly zone, section 42C, as well as the ARHD, section 38. It's essentially the same table. Of course, the numbers look a little bit different, and based on where I think the commission was sort of headed, I took the liberty, but there's no magic to it, in the ARHD, given that that would always be, to some extent, a smaller project because it can never be larger than 15 acres, so by definition, you're only going to squeeze so many houses onto it. I started with a 1 through 10, and then up to 5%. Could be people who don't qualify for the age restricted, or put another way, somebody not over 55 living in the home. And then over 11, which would essentially be the balance of the project at 10%. And then in the elderly zone, which could have obviously significantly more units, and in our case has obviously significantly more units, because that tract could be infinitely big, I scaled it at 1 to 20, 21 to 50, and over 51. Again, there's no real magic to those numbers. It was sort of my best estimate based on sort of where the commission was sort of seemed to be heading, but at least it gives you something to look at, and to some extent, if you wanted to play with the numbers a little bit, there's something in front of you to sort of be able to do that. And then the rest of the regulation remains, other than a comma that was misplaced that I've corrected, the same as last time. And as I mentioned to you last time, the elderly section will now mirror the ARHD section in terms of who can live there, with the one addition I made, which has been consistent since the beginning of the application, the hardship language. But I think the commission's main concern for where we ended last time and to pick up this evening is the percentiles. So that was what I did to try and meet what you guys were, I think, looking for. I've spoken to Barbara about this. Actually, again, we had a conference call. Barbara was comfortable with this concept. We discussed very briefly, and I do want to indicate briefly, the concept of 100% 55, which isn't part of your current regulation. She and I both have some reason to be concerned about that. I don't want to put words in Barbara's mouth, and I do want to emphasize it was a brief conversation, but it gave her a moment for pause, and I think she indicated in her mind the 100% 55 concept really was more for a assisted living facility where you really only have people who are quite aged versus a more diverse populace, which we'll have in a typical condominium project, particularly one of a couple hundred units. So she thought this made a lot of sense, and of course, the percentiles is up to this group's discretion, but we did talk about the concept of 100% 55 briefly. But we think this is what makes sense and is compliant with the federal statutory scheme, most importantly, because no one wants to obviously be on the wrong side of that equation. So that's all I have to offer in terms of anything new. I'm obviously happy to field any questions that anyone may have for me as on behalf of the applicant.
Just refresh my memory, in the age restricted, how many units are in your proposal? Just
About 29, I believe.
29, okay, thanks.
So, if I could just maybe add, I also was on the conference call with Attorney Porto and Barbara Schellenberg, and we did talk through just some concepts based on what the commission's concerns were. And Attorney Schellenberg did reference that HOPA document that you all had received, which did say at least 80%, so the commission does have the discretion to do more than. So there is that flexibility. We talked about the age-restricted housing district regulations, which is section 38, which the commission most recently had revised and has this section and these exceptions actually, which talks about persons who are 55 years of age or older, and then if they have a spouse, so the 55-year-old person passes away, but a spouse can still remain in the unit, and then there are these exceptions that were built in. Those were not and are not included currently in the elderly development. So the proposal to include those in the elderly development, I think, strengthens that regulation. This 80-20 discussion kind of takes it even farther, just to kind of summarize. And also in this proposal, it talks about having the common interest ownership community being the organization that would enforce and uphold the regulations. So that's also something that we currently do not have in either of the sections of our zoning regulations.
Ron, you said you might have some questions?
I'm not there yet.
Did you already go over who is seated and that Ron reviewed the minutes?
Oh, yeah, so, Ron is, Commissioner Sienna is seated, he's reviewed the minutes. Bill?
Yep, I did too.
Commissioner Galdenzi, and at the last meeting, Trish,
And
Alex and myself were at that meeting, so we're all seated for this public hearing.
Gary, for the ARHD, if I'm remembering what they had for a map proposed, they didn't have the full amount of houses that could fit into the 15 acres. For the full 15 acres, whether it's the map or anywhere in the town, what's the max amount of houses that could be
so it's
placed there?
5 units per acre.
It's 5 units
So
per
for
acre.
15 acres would be 75 units.
Okay.
But that doesn't take into consideration if there are any wetlands
Mhm.
or
Right.
setbacks,
Yeah.
open space.
Okay.
And who monitors the percentage of elderly?
That would be the association. In my initial review of the percentage proposal, this is just very simple and kind of silly, but the proposal talks about for 1 to 10 units, 5%. That's half of a unit, so it doesn't really make sense to start there. But that's just, one thing that
Yeah, I was
wouldn't,
looking,
wouldn't work for the percentage.
yeah, so I'm looking at both of them.
And by unit, do we mean an actual, do we mean like structures and buildings or an actual, like, place where people live in?
Yeah,
So
unit.
like,
One
an
unit.
apartment building could be one unit, but then there's 50 apartments in it, so we're talking,
The
the
unit-
actual apartment is the unit?
Yes,
Okay.
yep.
Right, and if it's a standalone, single family.
You're 100% right. Each
Okay.
dwelling unit is not the whole
It's not
big
a structure,
building.
a
No,
whole
it's not a
building,
structure, no,
an
it's
actual dwelling.
what you would buy and you would live in with your
Okay.
family.
Max units on the, our housing community max. elderly housing?
Um,
It can be, yeah, okay, yeah,
Unlimited.
right, exactly. So I mean, that's one thing, as Carrie's mentioned, on the age restricted, the 1 to 10 really doesn't make a whole lot of sense, because it becomes less than 1. And being that there's 75 max, I think we should expand that. I mean, the percentages that may be okay, but just 1 to 10, and then over 11, I mean, I think we should, for 5%, it should definitely be more than 10. And then as far as the second one, the elderly development, because it's such a, I mean, it can be such a vast, we have to think about that one, because those could be larger developments. So I think, 1 to 51, I mean, I don't really see that coming into play, because most of these developments are on larger tracts. So, I mean, it's just something to think about.
What was I understood I didn't catch your comment about I understood 1 to 10.
Yeah, that should go
5%
up.
doesn't make sense.
Yeah, and then whatever.
But what was your comment about? I didn't understand.
Well, no, I mean, whatever 1 to 10 changes, then that would change the over 11. If we made it 25, then it would be, over 25 there.
I
So,
see,
yeah,
okay.
I'm just saying, I think it's,
understand.
I just think it
I
just
understand.
needs to be tweaked a little bit.
Yep, I
And then, I mean, on the other one, I think, like I said, I mean, because of the scope of a development that can be used in there, the 1 to 51 would, I mean, anything over 51 would probably come into play every time.
Mhm.
So, I mean, consider that. I mean, either we change the numbers, or, I mean, you could just say, if we want to, leave it at 80-20, 90-10, or whatever it might be, but I just think that the scope of it would be over 51 in most cases, if not every case, when this was applied.
It's hard to
I'm just-
know, you're
yeah, no, I'm
right,
just
it's a
throwing it out there.
larger, typically I think it'd be larger, we know the ARHD is small,
Right.
and even though 75 is, I think 75 is, as Carrie was alluding to, is probably a little bit illusory, by the time you get done with setbacks and wetlands, I mean,
Right.
we have the full acreage, and we're showing around 30, and we're fairly dense, so, I mean, we do have some wetlands, which is specific to our site, but I think 75, if you're looking to sort of create a
Yeah.
scale, I think 75 is probably unrealistic. I mean, you'd have to have like the perfect lot. I mean, you'd have to have one with like no wetlands. You have to have your open space requirement at 20%, right? Carrie, I think it's 20%. So 75 on math seems like the right number, but I haven't done my, if you take 20% of 15 acres out, you're down a couple acres alone, and then figuring out, your roadway. So I don't think the number you're really looking at is 75. Probably guessing at it, your top end may be closer to 50.
Yeah,
And that
well,
may-
I mean,
that may still be
I'm even
pressing you.
I'm gonna throw out just this number, let's just say 60. Okay, if you do 60, I mean, that's 6. I mean, I'm sorry, yeah, that's 6, that's 6. I mean, something like that, we can either change the 1 through 10 and then the over, or just say, if you think that 10%, because roughly, I mean, the most you're gonna have is 6 out of 60, or 7.5 out of 70, you just make the thing 90-10.
Yeah.
I mean, or whatever, I'm just throwing out there, I mean, just throwing that number out there, so. As far as the other one, I mean, as far as the other one, I mean, like, I think the developments that I see in our town, that the, properties that would fit, I mean, they would most likely all go over 51. So if you wanna think about changing the tiers on those, or lock into a certain percentage, but, whatever you guys, I'd like to hear some other thoughts on that.
Harry, I'm gonna play devil's advocate on this. Let's do the ARHD. I know how you said you wanted to increase that, but this is including when they're initially developing as well. And I know that's some of the main concerns with, well, what happens if they only develop, for any project? What
Right.
happens if someone goes in and develops only so much and it's set? Well, if they only develop so much, then if you had this tier system in,
Oh, yeah.
it sticks to that. For the ARHD, the 1 to 10, 5%, obviously it'd be 0 initially. I take that as, okay, well, they're trying to make this as true as they can be for the age restriction. And they're trying to make it so it's like, okay, when they get over 10, until they get to 20, over 20, they have one in there. So it's holding true to what they've been trying to do here and what's been advocated, trying to see what's currently in the town.
That's a good point.
I'm-
But how about the number though, like from 1 to 11? Because like, and
If
for
you
the
can't have-
AHRD, the most you're gonna do
Yeah.
is 75, which probably is not gonna happen unless it's a perfect lot. So even if you assume 50.
Well, if you can't have half a unit, you can't have half a unit, so
Right.
you just can't have it if it falls underneath it.
Oh, no, I'm just saying, is that, are those numbers, the way it is right now,
Yeah.
are you comfortable with those?
Yeah, for
Okay.
the ARHD,
Yeah.
I'm comfortable with that.
Okay.
Cause it's trying to hold true to what that is, and, at least for this map amendment, what they're trying to do with the ARHD, that's where they're initially gonna start the project. So if that's what has been expressed with trying to keep it with the age restriction, they're trying to show good faith with that, then why not? With the
Elderly housing.
elderly
Or elderly
part,
development.
that, like you said, there are a lot of places in the town that you can get easily over 51 units in. But again, they have to achieve those 51 units first before they go beyond that and get to 20%. So that you could tweak a little bit, but again, it's doing a tier system, so they're trying to sell these as they're going until you could get someone that's under the 55 in there, whether it's the 5%, 10%, or 20%.
Well, you can always change the 21 to 50 to like 2175 or something like that, if, or, you know, I mean,
Well,
or,
yeah,
I'm
it's
just
more
saying, if you
flexible,
want,
yeah.
if you wanna change, if you're looking to change that, I mean, that could be something like a larger number in there.
Well, the current developments right now, do we have the number on how large those are
I mean, there's
that
no-
currently exist in these,
Mm,
in the town?
I don't know exact numbers for Evergreen Woods,
Let's
for
not-
example.
Let's not, yeah,
Yeah.
that's kind of, it's just, how about,
That's not all assisted living.
no, I'm just saying, but that's.
Or like what the
that's
lot
kind
size
of,
is that this is zoned in, like what's the,
Yeah.
what, do we know like the
Probably
average lot
village,
size that's in general, that a unit could go into this?
Say it again, sorry.
Like the average lot size that this
Oh.
is zoned in, or no?
The
There was 3
elderly
lots.
development?
Yeah, for elderly development, typical.
3 potential. But then the others
Oh,
could be a
other
mess.
parcels in,
Yeah.
in town?
Yeah, it's
Well,
very
it's
industrial,
it's-
right?
It's residential as well.
Yeah, so I mean, you can amass them as well, yeah.
So-
Oh, it is, okay.
Yeah.
It's
I
IL
thought it
and,
was-
Yeah.
residential.
And residential.
Okay.
So
Let me-
it's a
I thought
minimum
it-
of 20 acres.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I
Yeah.
think I followed what you're saying, but wouldn't 90-10 achieve the same thing? Cause as they built, you'd have to have 90% age restricted anyway before you could have that one that would make you 10%. I think that's what your point was. Was your point with the?
For the AR?
Yeah, the
Yeah.
age restricted. Was
Yeah,
that if you're
it's-
building and you've started with 5 or something, right? You wanna
Exactly.
hold them true to what the intent, but 90-10 would do that too, wouldn't it? Cause they can't,
Yeah.
you'd have to have 90% age
Exactly.
restricted before you could even consider one for the 10%.
Yeah.
And then how about, the elderly development? Bill, again, thoughts on that?
Not right now.
Right.
I mean, I heard you said, you were saying that this is, to your point, irrelevant because we would have it till larger sizes anyway? Is that what the point you were
Well,
making?
yeah, I'm saying I mean, Alex's
120.
point, Alex's point that as they build,
Mhm.
this would come into play only, for the most part, and once they cross 50, most parcels would be over,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, over 51. So most of this would come into play while they're going through the development process. Then once they get past the early stages of phases, I'm sorry, not the development, the phases, that they develop in,
If it was
so.
yeah, I mean, this is 5, but if you said like the 90-10, I'm just throwing it out, I mean,
Yeah.
90-10 would pretty much,
Well, they're looking for, yeah, but yeah.
would do the same as well.
But then over 75,
Yeah.
it's,
Right.
they're looking for 20%, so.
I
But,
think another way to say this is that So the benefit of any developer going with the elderly development is density.
Yeah.
So under traditional zoning, if you have 20 acres, 1 unit per acre, through the 1 through 20, you'd automatically be at 20 units, right?
Mhm.
So, whereas to Harry's point, you'd be going for much higher than 20 units right from the beginning. So you'd automatically start
Yeah,
at
the
the
numbers
20
shouldn't
to
change
the
that.
Right.
50 units on a 20-acre parcel. You'd at least be doubling the density, if not going higher.
Yep.
And it's hard to calculate because in the elderly development, it talks about the density is for efficiency in one-bedroom dwelling units, it's 8,000 square feet per dwelling unit. So it's based on square footage, not, I don't know.
Not
if-
lot size.
Right, not
And then
lot
you've
size,
got your wetlands,
not
so, you know,
units per.
It's hard to know, but I think your point is well taken, that they'll be bigger, you know, but on 20 acres, by the time you get done with your roadway and, you know, your wetlands and your topographic issues, you know, it's hard to know. But as I said, this was just a start, you know, to me, there was no magic but I wanted to get something on a piece of paper that you guys could start to sort of move the parts of the puzzle around, but, I think from the applicant's perspective, if you wanted to move those up a little bit, and we're not gonna jump out of our skin, you know, the ARHD is more confining, you know, that number in some sense is more impactful because, you know, reality is we've got a couple 30 units in there, and that probably represents between, you know, probably the middle to the middle high margin of what you're really gonna probably get in those zones. You know, probably on average, maybe 30 to 50, depending on your topographic conditions. The elderly could get much bigger. I mean, you could mass 100 acres if you really wanted to, and just keep adding either residential or IL tracts, and you can make it almost as big as you can get enough land together to do it for. But so if you went to, you know, 20 to 40, 40 to 60, and 60 over, or 75 is the number where you get the 20%. I think those numbers would make some sense.
I think a little higher. Because then if you do have a larger project, there's reason to, I mean, to get up to that larger number, to get the larger percentage to open it up.
Where's larger?
Oh, on the elderly development, so, like, 1 to 20 is, I mean, that's not even really coming to
Yeah,
play.
it's not
I mean,
really-
that's just, you know, the 5% on that, I mean, the 1 to 20 doesn't really make a whole lot of sense.
No.
So, I mean, if anything, that's, you know, 10%, I'm just gonna throw out a number, throw a number out there.
Like 50 to 150, 90, 10, and.
Well, I was
or
thinking like
150 and
1
20.
from, 1 to like 99, and I'm just throwing it out there, 10%, and then everything over 100 could go to 20%, or maybe, you know, 1 to 125, 10%, because that's 12. So at 125, that's, well, I think you can round up to 13. So would be 13 units out of 125, and then 125 and larger would be 20%. You know, again.
I agree
That's
to
just
go
numbers I'm
larger.
playing with.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm just playing with these. The smaller number, like I said, 1 to 20,
Yeah.
that doesn't really make sense. They have 5%, you know,
Yeah, I don't like.
that's not, so if they, yeah. So I'm just throwing it out there on that one. Yeah, just do
So
it.
the lawyer, I just have a question on this, the lawyer's seen this, right?
Yes, Barbara Schellenberg.
Which one? Which part of it?
About the, checking the,
Yep.
enforcing these rules or these
Yes.
regulations. So is it only at sale? It reads only at sale. Is that the only time it's relevant to enforce them? I'm trying to envision something. I haven't thought it through well enough right now to think, is there other opportunities for doing something that's not in,
Well, somebody could sublet it, but then the condo association wouldn't know that if somebody sublet it. I mean, they could, but I mean, most likely, they could, you know, I mean,
Is it-
some.
I guess another way, is this enough for us? Just throwing that out there.
Well, if I can,
Well, I think it's more than we've had in the past, because we
I
always, it's
agree.
something, yeah, it's something
But
we've
that's-
always.
That's been
yeah.
public comment.
and
that
I can
I've
comment
heard
on that,
about that.
I'm not sure you were here for the first meeting, where I
I
think we got
was.
into it more. There's, and I know I went into some detail last meeting, there's 2 or 3 paragraphs, actually it's the better part of the page, that I initially sent in, when we first were thinking about the application, which talks about the compliance. There's a whole compliance section, that basically we throw into the condominium documents that is pursuant to the federal regulations that dovetail to the federal statute over age discrimination, about how the condo associations enforce these censuses, the yearly, review of who's in the unit. So it's not just at sale.
Okay.
And
I do
it's,
remember that,
Yeah, so
Okay.
even though it's not here, that will be, and I can certainly represent for this applicant, that will be in our condominium documents. It's a relatively, it's a full page of what they go through, how they do it, what constitutes valid identification and verification of who's living in the unit when they go to do that.
So the federal law requires condominium associations to have that? Or
Yeah.
are you just telling me that your condo association?
No, there's a federal regulation that
all-
talks about how to comply
How to
with the
comply.
statute.
That doesn't mandate them to put anything in their condo association. You're gonna do it.
We are definitely
That law
gonna do it.
doesn't require them. It says this is what you need to do. It doesn't tell them they have to put it in.
It definitely tells
I
you.
just wanna understand that.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. The federal statute, I believe, is silent on enforcement in and of itself. I mean, it talks about how you can discriminate on age without running afoul of the age discrimination laws. Then there's some regulations that talk about how you go ahead and do it. What can you use for appropriate verification? If somebody goes, well, I'm 55, well, okay, give me your driver's license, give me your passport. And there's some detail, which I shared with Carrie early on, which I could resend and we could fold into your regulation, but it's a little on the long side and it's a little bit into the weeds. But I'd be happy to resubmit it, and we could make it part of the town's regulation. But I can certainly represent it. We would be happy to put it into our documents in terms of connection with our application, that we will have that material in it. We already have it in our Sunrise project. I've got it handy. It's at the office. I can represent, we're gonna pop it into our document. So at least for this project, it's
Yeah.
gonna
I
happen.
was throwing that out for the commission to think about.
Well, we don't necessarily need to put in all the verbiage in, can't we just put a section that says pursuant to federal law, blah, blah, blah?
Well, that's probably under the Fair Housing Act.
It's where it is.
Yeah, so it's already in here.
Oh.
Yeah, it's at the very end of of C.
It says they need to comply to those things, but it doesn't mean they have to necessarily mandate a annual check like you're gonna. I
That's
don't
how you-
think.
Well, that's how
let's
you do
clarify
it.
that.
I don't know,
Okay.
I don't know, I've never had somebody not do it, and I've never been
Yeah,
on any litigation
okay.
where somebody says, listen, you didn't bother, and, somebody's taking the this kind of association,
You-
to court over it, but that's what is expected.
Yeah, okay, well,
And that's,
that makes sense.
it's it's a self-regulating deal. If ultimately, if the association falls out of compliance, it's a problem for the folks who live there.
True, yeah.
How if somebody from outside wants, like your compliance report, somebody wants, somebody either living there or the town says we want to do a check, and so.
I think as long as it doesn't violate the privacy statutes. There's obviously always privacy to these days with, personal information, personal identifiable information. I don't think it would be a problem as long as whoever is asking for it doesn't receive information that, like when you go to the doctor, you're not supposed to get certain
Right.
information if
Yeah.
you're not the patient. Sort of the same idea.
Right. So, we can mull over the percentages for a little bit, but since it's a public hearing, I want to open it up, but just something I was thinking about, so. Let's start with this, on the age-restricted housing, the 5%, I don't know if I think the whole thing should be just 90-10.
Yeah.
If you want to do a percentage, 90-10, make it just 90-10 straight
Yes.
out, because the smaller number doesn't really factor in. On the elderly development, the 1 to 20, I think the numbers were low, so I'm just gonna throw these numbers out. 1 to 125, 10%. Anything over 25, or 125 units could fall into the 20. that's just something to think about, and we can come back to that. You can mull that over for a little bit and think about it. Since it is a public hearing, it was open, still left open from the previous meeting. Would anybody like to speak on this? Anybody at all? Okay. All right. Do you have any other comments?
No, I think we've really
Okay.
discussed this at some length. I don't think I have anything else to offer. I'm happy to answer any other questions. Otherwise, I think we can close the public
All right.
portion of this.
I mean, so the two things that we're still mulling over the percentages. I think I still wanna keep the public hearing open for a few minutes while we talk about this before we do any closure on that. But 90-10 consideration for the, AHRD.
Restricted.
Yep.
Yep.
And then from 1 to 125 units at 10%, over 125, 125 and or 126 and above, how do you get this written?
Just over.
Over 125 would be 20%.
Over 126.
Yeah.
I agree with the larger numbers, I don't like arbitrary numbers.
Yeah.
Like, something like, where did you guys choose those numbers? I don't know, we just picked out of a hat. Is there any way, both based off of experience and our other pieces of land, that we could somehow, in some way, I don't know, make them less arbitrary? I just don't like arbitrary numbers. It's like something has to be.
Yeah, but we're
based
developing this
in
for the first time. I mean, we're
something.
basing off of the federal statute. I don't know, if it's I don't know if it's a statute.
Yes.
But you say up to 20% can be, so we're working off of that.
Yeah,
So-
the percentages, just like the one
so
to
they-
125.
so that's what they're going off
We
of.
need to base it in something a little bit
I was
more
gonna ask you what,
concrete.
I'm not challenging, but what is the logic with the going higher if it's over 125?
What's that? The logic is?
Yeah,
Well, I mean.
what were you thinking? Again, I'm not
So,
challenging, I just wanna
you know,
understand it.
Yep, so where the,
Are we
the
saying?
the statute, or the
I
act.
know we can go up to 20, I mean,
Right.
so you said one to,
Why
so
not
we're
just
saying
leave it at
one to
9 to 10?
125,
Right.
we wanna keep it at 10%.
I'm
But if
trying
you
to-
have 126 or more, you can have 20%.
Right.
Like, what would that,
Well, originally it was, the whole thing was 80-20.
yeah.
So
Right.
based off of that, there was, at the previous couple meetings, we said we weren't so comfortable with that because we're worried about only doing so many units and not going forward and stuff like that. So we're saying maybe we'll reduce it, maybe, we'll play around with the numbers. This is kind of like this is with the landing, we
So-
talked about tiered.
If there's is this saying that if there's a development that has 126 units, it could be 80-20?
Yes.
Correct.
Okay,
But only after they
Okay.
get the CO.
yeah. No,
So
I understand,
if
yeah.
you're building in phases, now, I mean, the numbers I came up with, like I said, I mean, are they arbitrary? Kind of, I just put a little thought behind it, the size and scope of some of potential projects.
Or it doesn't have to be tiered either. It was just
Oh, no,
something we
no,
wanted
no,
to be
no.
thorough about.
But we talked
Yeah.
about tiering it, so, and that's what the applicant did, is come back with a tiered approach, which is good to look at. Where those land, if you have any other, thoughts on it, please, by all means.
That's why I think the driving factor could be basing it in something a little bit less arbitrary. I don't know what that is, hence the
Yeah.
reason why I'm like,
Well,
look
yeah,
at the other
that's-
if the other properties are huge, but then again, you don't know, cause somebody could buy up a bunch of residential.
Right, right.
That's true.
So if you can take like an average,
So I just don't like arbitrary.
yeah, well,
Because
we're gonna
creating
have
a concrete
to,
regulation that's
we're dipping our toe tonight into
become law,
arbitrary,
it's
because this is the first time we're doing it, so we can
Somebody
kinda.
judge just picked out of a hat.
And essentially, this is going back to like, well, this is initial development, is what that essentially goes down to. I'm comfortable like with 1 to 99 or 1 to 100 to make it easier, rather than 1 to 26, but again,
Yeah.
that number's up for discussion. But yeah, it's, for the elderly part, you have that threshold, okay? They hit that part of the phase, wherever it might be in town, and now they're going beyond that. Alright, so they're at the same guidelines as the federal now for 80/20.
How big is everyone, how many units and everything?
I'm not sure of the exact number.
Or again, to like not have arbitrary numbers, we just have one percentage, you know? It,
Well, that's originally what it was, and then
Yeah.
we weren't
Yeah,
comfortable doing
I mean,
it.
I like the tier approach, I'm gonna say, I mean, that's, you know, it gives us, it gives us a little look at the project, saying if it's gonna be a smaller project.
Well, that holds more to what the expression of the past couple of meetings was of, what the original,
Yeah.
elderly complex was developed for, being 100% for that age group, so it's come in between those two.
Any thoughts on numbers?
Ron, you've been
Quiet.
silent.
It's based on square footage, so it's.
No.
Square
one
footage of the
bedroom.
Yeah,
land?
yeah,
No, it's,
No, that
the
is-
density in elderly
Yeah.
is, efficiency in one bedroom is 8,000 square feet per dwelling unit. And for two bedroom dwelling units, it's 9,500 square feet per dwelling unit.
That sounds huge. What does that mean?
9,500
So it's about
square
4
feet
per
per
acre.
dwelling unit.
yeah.
If you round to 10 and you
Yeah,
have 40,000 square feet in an acre,
For the two
you're talking about a
bedroom.
density of 4 per acre on average.
So,
You need a pretty big, I mean, we've got 90 acres, we've got some wetlands out there, but,
Yeah.
you know, we're pretty flat, you know, we don't have a lot of heavy topographic issues. You know, this is a pretty big development, I mean, I think you guys are, you know, for a personal opinion, I think you're right in the ballpark, but, you know, to get over 250 units, you need well over 100 acres by the time you get done with open space issues and your roadways, I mean, you'd have to amass a pretty good tract of land to get much bigger than what we're doing. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
sure there's some around, but, you know, you're starting to get up there in terms of raw acreage.
Well, and then you also have to keep in mind that the developer has to provide the appropriate utilities, so specifically sewer. So that also comes into account. That drives the number of units that they can do as well. So even if someone has the land, it has to be in the right location near sewers to be able to handle the higher density. So just looking at the math, so if you went with 1 to 125 units at 10%, that would be 12 units of, at the max.
Yeah.
12 units of 125, that would be under 55. And if you know, again, go up from there, so then 20% would be, that's where, I guess, we would round up there, so it would be, 24 units on up from there,
Yep.
depending on the size of the development.
Could what drives our thinking a little, instead of thinking in term, I mean, we could keep units
We have to.
in here, yeah, but my thinking is like, again, to not have it so arbitrary, could we drive our thinking and calculations by acreage? So for example, like 125, if we're like thinking 4 units an acre divided by 4, that's 31 acres. Again,
But
something
then
to
when
make
you
it
start
nicer.
getting in, are you talking about the whole lot? Are you talking about after everything's
that
subtracted
works.
out?
Cause of wetlands, et cetera.
Yeah, do
But
by
then-
unit
but then you
count, I've
lose-
never seen anybody do it another way.
No, just again,
Yeah.
to make it not so
31
arbitrary, well, we
31
came up
is-
with this many units
31's
based on this
arbitrary though, isn't
thinking.
it? It's just spinning the number from
Right.
units to acres. It's still arbitrary.
Yeah, I'm just gonna
Sorry.
say, I mean.
That's
Sorry.
what's driving me
Yeah.
I
crazy.
mean, I'm gonna.
Cause we just keep going back and forth
So,
on this.
what I'd like to do is, for now, I'm gonna say, we're gonna make the restricted housing at 90-10.
Yep.
And then I mean, when we have our deliberation, we can bring this back up, but I wanna put something on, at least so we can move forward. And then on the elderly development, it would be from 1 to 125, would be at 10%. And then over 125, let's change that terminology. It's gonna be from 1 to 125, and then from 126 and above. And then the same, and the other one doesn't matter.
And what's the minimum for elderly again? 20 acres?
Yes.
Elderly minimum's 20.
And the max for age restricted is what, 15?
15.
Yep. Yep. All right.
So, can we just go through the language of
Yeah, I
both
wanna-
of
yep,
those? Just
yep.
to review those
Make sure that
before you
they
close the
match it
public
up.
hearing?
Yep.
So for section 38, the proposed changes under age restriction, each dwelling unit must be accompanied by, and then they would insert, subject to section B below, at least, so section B below,
No.
no, B and C.
No, it's B.
Oh, okay, B, so, subject to section B below, at least one person who is 55 years of age or older, spouse of an occupant, so all of that would stay the same. Then proposal to add parenthesis F, a child or dependent person of an occupant pursuant to A and B above, except in the case or cases of emergencies or hardships.
Okay.
And then adding section B, which is the Fair Housing Act permits housing intended for persons 55 and older, provided that, little I, at least 90% of the occupied units are occupied by at least one person who is 55 years of age or older. 2, the community publishes and adheres to the policies demonstrating the intent to be age restricted. And 3, the community meets certain rules for verifying the age restrictions of the community. Thus, as set forth above, up to 10% of the units may be occupied by individuals, all of whom are under 55 years of age, but not less than 18 years of age.
Yes, but we can get rid of that, so it just said, we could just get rid of it, as set forth above, because that's no longer there. It comes out. Because it
We
B's
could
referring to.
read style that just up to 10% can be
Yeah.
occupied, take out the table. We
Less
don't really
to
don't need
above.
G
She
anymore.
begins with just up,
Okay,
right? Yep, because there's no more above.
I see.
Yep.
Oh, I see, right. Up to, okay. And then C, the constituent documents of the common interest ownership community shall contain provisions requiring the declarant in connection with the initial sale of units and the association as to all subsequent sale of units to enforce the declaration, which shall incorporate the purpose and standards of the zoning regulations, so that at all times the common interest community will qualify for the 55 years of age or older housing for older persons exemption under the Fair Housing Act.
Okay, if I can raise just one point, subparagraph B, this was, what it says, the Fair Housing Act permits housing for tenant persons 55 and older, provided at least 80%. That's the federal language. I don't think we should change it to 90, because that implies that's what the federal statute says. So
Okay.
I think that should stay at 80, even though we're making
Yeah.
it 90 here.
Okay.
Because I think that would be a misstatement of the federal statute. And then I think in 3, the community meets certain rules for violating, and then maybe we can put, again, we're keeping with the language as we go, maybe, but notwithstanding above, only up to 10% of the units may be occupied by individuals, which will then dovetail into the 90-10 split that you guys are sort of thinking about. I think that's how I would draft that language.
Do we need a lawyer to look at that? I mean, I don't.
I would feel better just to have a clean draft of all of this. I know we've been
Yeah.
talking about this
Yeah.
for numerous meetings, but just to.
So, I apologize, I don't recall if last time we talked, what, do we talk about what an emergency or hardship is? Or is it
Could be anything, that's
defined somewhere?
basically the conclusion we came up with.
Okay, I thought
It's
we
not
talked about
defined,
it.
no.
It's not
Yes.
defined,
Yeah,
because we often talk about that with like,
Mhm.
your apartments you put on your, it's like you have to demonstrate hardship, and what
Right.
does that mean, and
Right.
sometimes.
Okay, let me jump in with my question. C, I'm sorry, I just talk over you. On C, where it says the declaration is at the initial sale of the unit, I was thinking of various scenarios. If, let's say I transfer title to someone under 55, a child of mine, or it's a quick deed, quick claim, whatever. Those aren't sales, those are just transfers of
It-
title.
Yep.
That circumvents this, doesn't it?
No, actually, we talked about that at the last meeting. Go ahead.
It's not an issue of ownership. We have lots of projects where the children, who are generally adult children, have aged parents, and for estate planning purposes, the children would own it. It's an issue of verification of occupancy of the person living there. It's got nothing to do with who owns it. I'm
Yeah, but
50,
that's-
I could
that's-
own one for my
That's
father.
That's at the time of the sale.
No,
No?
It's at, what?
no, look
okay.
above, look above, in section,
States
in
the
B,
occupancy.
it talks about just the occupancy of 10%.
What we do
So
as a
that
practical
goes
matter.
back to my point before about,
It's not just
so
a sale, but
we're
I.
saying, I understand there's the law that says they need to demonstrate this, but
Let me tell you how this actually works in practice. There's an affidavit that we have the buyer sign at the time of the closing that says at least one person is gonna be 55 or over, if in fact it's an aged couple. I mean, if there's two 30-year-olds, obviously they can't sign it. That's your first litmus test as a practical matter. And then it's on to the association thereafter. Title is irrelevant. It could be in the kids' names, and again, I use kids loosely. You could flip it 50 times. It's who lives there. So you could have a unit, you decide to rent it, if we're at the 10% max or whatever it is, you gotta rent it to the right people. That's how it really works as a practical matter.
I see them as conflicting.
Well, then what-
You're saying 55 and above, I'll buy you that, and it could be in someone's name, prior to, you could put your elderly parents in, but what's gonna stop someone who owns this from moving in?
It's always about who lives there. It's not about title. The federal law and how we discriminate on age has nothing to do with title. It's an issue of who lives there.
And C, in essence, is talking about how the rules are gonna be enforced, not necessarily the nitty-gritty like in B, correct?
Correct. Simply
just like it-
enforcement.
C just
C just
says that
enforcement,
upon
not-
sale or transfer sale. So
Not
if I-
criteria.
If I buy something and I never sell it for 50 years and there's multiple people, this C never gets
Well-
enforced, but I understand the other thing, but there's for me, there's just nothing.
Well, I can put it back in.
Yeah, I know, I don't.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm
I'm
happy to
saying
put it
that,
back
but
in.
I'm
We're not,
just
it's not
saying,
like we're
so
not trying
it's-
to comply with it.
Yeah, just a transfer of title isn't a sale.
Well, I mean, the town, we don't have enforcement for that. So we can say that the wording is one way or the other, but we aren't gonna get into the enforcement part of it. I mean, that's why they're gonna have their own records that can be maybe requested from the town on an occasional basis. If we wanna go in and say, what's your occupancy, and take a
Yeah.
look at that.
I understand,
mean,
but but that in a sense, you don't need this.
Well, no, the lawyer, our
This
lawyer
is-
already looked at it.
No, I
So
understand,
I'm not
but
gonna take
it-
something out the lawyer put
No,
in.
I'm not
I'm
suggesting that
okay.
here, I'm
Okay.
saying, I'm saying it's misleading though, it's just, it.
I don't think it's
and-
misleading.
Well, I'm just saying you read it and you think, okay, good, there's something good enforced, but in a sense there really isn't. Because there's this other process that's occurring it's really enforcing this.
I don't know what that is.
It's true.
What-
The annual check that the association has to do under the federal law, which you
Right.
said, really enforces this.
Right.
Ensuring that only 55 and older are living in here on an annual basis.
Right.
This doesn't, this is only upon sale, so.
I agree, this talks about, but it also says.
That's what I meant misleading.
So that
It's
at
not-
all times, the community will qualify for 55-year-old housing. So, I mean, this is our approach to the language. I
Yeah.
suppose if you want, I could add, and annually, I mean, I can work some annualization language in here. I mean, that's how it works. I'm happy to work with Barbara, we can put a little annualization language in there. And it's certainly not departing from what.
Would it be working backwards to take out the phrases in connection with the initial sale of units and then also in all subsequent sale of units? So it would read, shall contain provisions requiring the declarant and the association to enforce the declaration, which shall incorporate the
Yes.
standards of the zoning, so that at all times.
Sure,
I don't
we're all
know.
getting
Yeah,
to the same
I-
place.
I think
Just
that-
because you're taking out
Just let
the,
Barbara take a look at it.
Yeah, I think it's just reads, I don't know if
Yeah,
misleading
take
is
out
the
the
right
sale,
word, but it makes you sound,
Makes-
like, oh, I get a
yeah.
warm fuzzy
It seems
feeling,
like
like,
it's
oh, this
only
is
at
good,
the
this is
sale
hot, but it's
or
not really
subsequent
doing
sales.
anything.
It should be
It's
at
really
all times.
worthless.
I think
this
that's
way.
Yeah.
This is
another
worthless.
option, do, we're all getting to
The
the
other
same spot.
part of that federal law is really the way you enforce it. This isn't enforcing anything, really.
Well, I think as Commissioner
For
Mason,
me.
the C is really just about enforcement.
Yeah. Yep.
It doesn't take away or add to what you're saying we can do in this zone, which is a 90-10. I mean, that's what the above really says.
Right.
C really is in there. C to some extent is gratuitous. I mean, I think it was appropriate to put it in there because there was nothing in your regs about it, but it's a little gratuitous. I
It
mean,
could be
really what it
tied
says is, hey, you
with
gotta
specific-
bury in your documents
Yeah.
some enforcement procedures so the town has something to fall back on and say, well, listen, we required as part of our regulatory scheme that there's an enforcement mechanism in place.
Yep.
But I think that's as far as you wanna go with it. I mean, you're not gonna monitor this.
Yeah.
I mean, you guys are gonna spend all day,
Yeah,
all
exactly.
year,
Yeah, yeah,
running
no.
around condominium associations looking for licenses.
Exactly. Yep.
Carrie, do you wanna go over I think we did this one, so you wanna go to the elderly development?
Sure. Okay, so section 42C, special use permits, elderly development. So under the general section, it would read, for purposes of this regulation, elderly shall mean housing intended for persons 55 and older, provided that at least 80% of the occupied units are occupied by at least one person who is 55 years of age or older. 2, the community publishes and adheres to the policies demonstrating the intent to be age restricted. And 3, the community meets certain rules for verifying the age restrictions of the community. Thus, as set forth below, up to 20% of the units may be occupied by individuals of all of whom are under 55 years of age, but not less than 18 years of age.
And the rest of it's exactly the same as before.
Right.
That's the same language. We should make the same changes, other than the table, of course.
Section 1, age restriction, right, it would mirror what's in the age-restricted housing district. And then there would be the addition of F, which is a child or dependent person of an occupant pursuant to A and B above, except in the cases of emergency or hardships. And then G, percentage occupancy limits, number of units in project. 1 to 125 would be 10% of the units could be under 55 when no occupant is over 55 years of age. And then 126 units and above would be 20%.
So so what we're gonna do is on the ARHD, you're gonna have Barbara take a look at C,
Yes.
okay? And then we also want her to make sure that the language is correct on the ARHD on section B, where it talks about at least, 80% of the because that's what the act
Fair
is.
housing.
So just have her check that, so she.
I'm just going to make clean copies
All right.
Yeah.
of both of these so that,
All right, so being that, I was gonna close, unless you have anything else, if you have any other comment, anybody else, before we close the public hearing?
Wait, you
If
said.
you got-
No, I just had something for Carrie. It
We'll
doesn't
go-
have to be. No, it's just on, it's on the existing
Mhm.
part.
Well,
I'm
let's
just
keep-
wondering,
keep it open for now, until you're done.
so, is elderly housing a requirement to be in a plan of conservation and development?
say that again?
Oh,
Oh,
is this referring to our plan of development? I just thought,
I don't know where it
I didn't
was.
know if that, it
Oh,
seems,
The
because that
commission
changes
shall
every
follow
10 years, I didn't know
procedures
if it's,
specified herein before
that's-
standards and conditions.
that's just, that has nothing to do really with tonight anyway, so we can
Yeah.
talk about that later.
So what that is giving the commission leverage through the special use permit to approve or deny an elderly development if it's not within the harmony of the town's plan of conservation and
Okay, great.
development.
So, okay.
Yeah, that's amazing.
All right.
Yep.
So, if there's no other comments, if you're all set, I am gonna close, make sure I get the right one first. Don't wanna close the one that we still need. Hold on.
2018-10.
Yep, so I'm gonna close the, public hearing for application 2018-10. Okay, so we're done with that. So then the next order of business is the continuation of 2018-11. That's the map amendment.
Switching gears,
What's that?
switching gears.
Yes,
Yeah.
Spent a lot of time on the other one, this feels like an afterthought now.
yes.
I guess just,
Yes,
no,
okay.
I think we're gonna stay with what we got. So, but thank you. Trying to refresh my recollection as everyone else's, we proposed to take 15 acres of our project, as everyone knows, and I'm not gonna go through the whole thing again, if we didn't bring the slides. Just to sort of, just extremely briefly, we think taking the first 15 acres, which of course is the most we can take, putting about 30 units in there plus or minus, makes a lot of sense for a couple of reasons. This, according to your 38.1, some of the reasons for using the RHD, the one that really strikes me is the one that makes most sense here, is most applicable. It's the transition zone between industrial and residential, and of course, Notch Hill is largely residential, and it bucks up against this rather large industrial piece. We bought 2 houses on the Notch Hill, as everyone's aware. One house will have to come down, accommodate our driveway. If we don't have the overlay, and it really only matters for that little area of the project. I mean, once you get up into the back and you're into the heart of the project, 6 one half does another. I mean, other than now probably a 10% differential on a couple units, it's really a homogeneous project. That's what we've all talked about. It's gonna all look the same, it's gonna behave largely the same. What this will do is we come back for site plan approval, which with a little luck, we'll be back in a couple months. It'll provide both the applicant and the commission with some ability to look at how do we want the front entrance to really shape up. Without the overlay, based on just current zoning regulations, we're gonna probably just end up with the one home that is there now, sort of to the right as you're looking at our project. The other one's gonna come down because that's where the driveway's gonna go, and that'll be that. This will allow us to put a couple homes in there. The initial map we put up, I think, had 6. Maybe we moved that down to 4. It's a site plan issue, obviously, we can do when we get into much more detailed, plans and the distances between the units. We think it's important from both a neighborhood perspective as well as a development perspective that the street line on Notch Hill looks sort of homogeneous. So we think probably putting another unit up front to keep the character of that street is important, and in harmony with the neighborhood. And that is exactly why I think the RHD exists, because without it, we know we can't put it in. Even if you said as a commission, and every neighbor got up and said, geez, we'd love to have one more house here, we all couldn't do it. So, I know it's a little, it sounds a little funny, but it really, to me, fits. I mean, this is the one time where you can really say, listen, this is a great overlay for the right purpose at the right time with the right project. We'll take it through the 15 acres. We've maxed it out. We've got some wetlands back there. We've got some open space as we described previously. Mike got up last time and indicated we meet all the requirements for wetland, Carol's wetland, and one other requirement I know we had to have.
The unit size.
Unit size, unit density.
Sorry, the parcel size.
The parcel size, we tagged all the bases, we have no problem meeting all the setbacks. So we really think it makes a lot of sense. It really is for the front, though. I mean, the applicant likes it, it fits for our project, it allows some flexibility on the entrance. That's really why it works well for this project. We intend to build the whole thing. If we don't build the whole thing for some reason, we are gonna start there as we represented. That'll be the part that's got our clubhouse in it, so it'll certainly look like a contiguous project in and of itself. And we'll have some open space even in that little area, and then there's a large open space, as everyone's aware, sort of the back left of the project that we've talked to the trails people about. So I don't really have a lot new. I don't think there was a lot of additional information. I think we sort of continued both last time just to keep them going together, but I think the focus of our meetings have been the text amendment as opposed to playing a little bit with the front entrance. But that's a brief recap as I understand it, but I'm obviously answering any questions you may have.
Again, this part of the public hearing is just the overlay, not any density and different things like that. That would come with site plan, if this was to move forward.
So the the age-restricted housing district zone concept does require a concept plan, which is why they provided that. As we've already talked about, the density could be up to 5 units per acre. It's not required. They show here on this plan, again with the concept, a 50-foot setback line from Notch Hill Road. And then also, I believe it's 15 feet from this residential from the side. 30. And then the blue dashed line is 150 feet, 100 feet, 100 feet. Which is not required, but is required for an elderly development, so it's just kind of a concept to look at as well. There are 2 homes, in the concept that are shown here. But if the commission were to approve a zone change, you know, there could be some leeway with discretion that the commission has if that fits with the harmony of the neighborhood.
Say that again, I'm sorry.
The 2 home, the density of the homes really can be altered.
Yeah.
When you get to the special use permit for the ARHD and the site plan. But as Attorney Porto said, their real intention for this zone change here is to allow for more than 2 units on Notch Hill Road and as a transition zone between R40 and industrially zoned lands.
So, you own the 2 properties, they can put the road in now without this.
Yes.
Okay. I wanted
That is correct.
to know if the public understands that, so the road can go in,
The only thing that
despite this.
they're trying, well, this would be.
No, I just, the only reason I mention that is because there was a lot of public comment last time about the concern here with traffic and things like that. The road can go in, even if this
Regardless
text
of the
amendment
house.
doesn't go through, so I just wanted to make that clear.
The map amendment.
The map amendment.
Routes map, right.
Map amendment.
Through a special use permit, but under elderly development.
Yes,
Right.
right.
And I think there was also some concern, and I think it was raised, we clearly have 2 entrances, both Notch and Fowler.
Mhm.
I think one individual, I was looking back at my notes, preparation tonight's thing, I think somebody said, you know, it's all gonna come out on Notch Hill, and just for the record for people here, it's a 2-access. I'm sure we're gonna need it, I'm sure fire would ultimately want it when we get more down the road on the site plan. So it's a 2-entrance, 2-access project, just so the record's clear for anybody who had that question last time. I know there was one individual who was concerned there wasn't a second point of egress.
Yeah, okay. I think the concern was more, it's from a practical standpoint, you're not gonna go out following that on Route 80 because of the traffic, and that was their point, I think.
No doubt.
That was
No,
how I
I
recall.
agree, but I,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah,
but at
that's
least
how I
the record's
recall.
clear on both those issues, that
Yeah.
we could do without it, subject to
Yeah.
the approvals.
So I just wanna clarify one thing on this. So, for the map amendment, regardless of, whether this goes through or not, this is just concept. The
Correct.
number of houses that they have represented, it could be just the one that's there, or it could be whatever is there. That's gonna come back at a separate time at a site plan.
Right. That'd be a
Correct.
public hearing.
Saying that.
Right.
Yeah.
Special use site plan?
Yes, special use,
So
right.
special
And
use site plan.
site plan is part of
Which we
the
have
special
a
use.
little more discretion if we said,
Yeah.
doesn't seem acceptable, we can,
It could
It's
be
not a-
adjusted,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Anybody have anything else? So the public hearing for application 2018-11 was continued from the last meeting. Does anybody have any comments they would like to make? Please state your name and address, please.
My name is George Fairmonger, address is 77 Fowler Road. I've been a resident on Fowler Road since 1987. There's probably no one here in this room knows that area more than me. A couple things I'd like to bring out. I wasn't able to attend the meeting last time, but I did watch it on TV. And there were some very valid points made about the traffic on Fowler Road. Just to give you a little history about Fowler Road. Fowler Road's an industrial road that was put in by Chris Jensen years ago, but in fact, it is not up to code or standard. It is an illegal road. It has no emergency turnaround as needed for any industrial road. The point where they want to put the entrance or exit meets with anywhere between 8 to 10 residents, and to a pinpoint. Okay, not only does it not have emergency access turnaround, there's no room to put one in unless land is commandeered by each and all the individual landowners there. So basically, the road was put in haphazardly. It was never put up to par, and it took Kurt 20 years of me nagging on him just to get the guardrails put on the bridge down at the end of the road, which he finally did. So I think these guys are putting the cart before the horse as far as using that as a legal access, either to come in or go out. There was no road there years ago, okay? City Mission was accessed basically across the street from the library. It was accessed there for years. Why nobody is considering that as an access point or entrance point, I don't know. It was above water. There was no wetland issues when I came into this town because we all went there and drove our dirt bikes and trucks. What was done afterwards by Cherry Hill or whatever, I don't know if there is wetland issues or not, but I think you really need to look at that as an alternative method of getting in and out of that road. I just think that there's alternatives that people are not discussing, and it needs to be looked into further before you actually make a decision that will affect us. A lot of decisions were made in this town, some good, some bad. When that property was sold some years back, the town could have acquired that property for $150,000. That's what I think the purchase price of that property. Had the town purchased that property, maybe we wouldn't be sitting here in an old building that's fallen apart on the outside. So the town has made some good decisions and not so good decisions. So I'm just asking you to have the foresight to look ahead. Another bad decision that I think the town has made, that was allowed to have a transfer facility in this town. If you look at this Main Street on any given day, it looks like the streets of New York City. It's filthy, there's garbage all over from these trucks coming in and out with their tailgates on and off. I believe that was another bad decision. I'm just asking you, I know the job is hard, and I respect every one of you for giving your time and doing what you do, but please have the foresight to look ahead. Not just today, tomorrow, look ahead 20 years and ask yourself, how is this gonna affect the people living on this road? How is it gonna affect the people living in this town? And is it a hindrance or is it an asset to the town?
So,
Thank you.
just before you leave, I just wanna make sure, just mention how the process, so this one is just to, a map amendment. So, your comments are valid, I'm sure the attorney is taking note of that. So the next, if this was able to, this part would move forward, then some of the comments that you brought up would be also be taken under the site plan, where they actually start saying, okay, this is how it's actually gonna work.
Yep.
Talking about the roads and different things like that, we kind of cross a little bit into it, but we'll get, where it really matters is when we get into the site plan, which would be phase 2, if this was to go forward. So, I appreciate your comments, but I just wanted to let you know that, how this process works for this.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Anybody else like?
Yeah.
Yep.
Scott Small, Notch Hill Road. We've lived on Notch Hill Road for 30 years, and it's a single-family residential street. Speaking about the comments at Fowler Road, a couple weeks ago, somebody mentioned something about, you don't want all those cars coming out there. And another point that the developer needs to consider too is this: if they're developing this elderly housing facility, that you wouldn't want that to be your main entrance. To try to make sales by coming in Fowler Road and driving past all the stuff that he had just talked about, and say, oh, come into our beautiful community, and have to drive past all that without improvements, that's, you know, that's not gonna make very many sales. So I'm glad you've established that this AARHD does not make a difference whether they come out on Notch Hill or not. But what does make a difference is the amount of housing that can go in there with the AARHD versus not having the AARHD.
Right.
That blue line, I mean, now we're looking at this other plan, it looks like it's only 75 feet. I don't know, maybe it's 100, but the scale and the distance don't seem to match the.
I don't know
mean,
if this is printed just.
it's whatever, it's, you know, if they're gonna make it 100 feet, it should be 100 feet, but that's not the point I'm trying to make. The 6 units up on Notch Hill, it's all single-family houses, it's been that way for years. To take this, any one of your houses there, have somebody buy the neighboring property and put in 6 condos right next to your house. That amounts to nothing more than spot zoning. It's not fair to the people that live on the street, and it shouldn't be that way. They should have that entrance he's talking about, and that entrance would be so much nicer if there were no houses in that residential zone, and you had a nice boulevard with a canopy of trees, and you come into this place. Now you're coming in to buy a unit, and you're coming in to this, wow, look at this place, it's beautiful. You come in, you're not driving past a bunch of condos on the side of the street, you're driving down an alleyway of something. But all the houses should be held back to maintain the property values of everybody on Notch Hill. Again, you all have houses here, you've all lived a long time in the town. Imagine taking your neighbor's house, well, and voice is shaky, and knocking it down and putting up 3 condos or 6 condos right next to you. That's just not fair to the people that live on the street. And I think they would actually have a better project if they were to eliminate that part, or even if you give them ARHD, have a condition that the houses do not come past the existing residential line. It's just not right.
Yeah, we have some flexibility on that.
Thank you.
So, yeah.
Thanks, Scott.
Anybody else like to speak? Seeing nothing else?
I have an email,
Okay,
sorry,
sure.
from Sandy Querfeld. This talks a little bit about the text amendment, but it talks about this as well, so I
Okay.
apologize. But to say, I just wanted to state that I would not want to live in a 55 and over community, which would allow 20% of the units to be under 55. There should be exceptions. For example, if a spouse passed and the spouse already living in the unit is under 55, he or she should be allowed to stay. Other than life events, the community should be a 55 and over community. In regards to exiting onto Notch Hill Road, it should not be allowed. The sightlines are not good coming out of that area. With the volume of cars, the exit should be on Route 80 or Fowler Road. Sandy Querfeld, 163 Notch Hill Road.
Anything else?
No.
Would you, yeah, you
I'll
wanna-
just respond briefly, and
Sure.
you really said it, I mean, we're not at site plan, we don't know there's gonna be 6 houses there, could be 4 houses, could be 3 houses. What I know is without the overlay, it'll be 0 houses. So I don't think that's prudent planning. When we get the site plan, we'll come in with something, you know, that's concrete. This commission will decide, you know, what works. People have a chance to comment again on the real site plan. So again, as I said, it's a planning tool that the town has made available. I think this is the perfect example of why we want to have it in our toolkit. It should be applied here. It's literally the right spot for the right piece. We've shown 6. Doesn't mean it's good at 6. I think people are sort of fixated on that number, which is premature. And traffic's a whole nother thing. We'll look at traffic. We have our traffic engineers been taking notes for the past 3 nights. We're doing the requisite studies. I'm sure we'll have a long discussion over traffic at the appropriate time. And, you know, we'll figure out the right way, the best way. Frankly, the investment was made in these lots to really improve the traffic in all candor. This property touches on some other roads. We didn't have to spend the money. This was really an effort to improve it. But that's really another discussion for another day. So I think as to the overlay, we should, you know, I think it makes sense here.
Okay, thank you.
Just real quick, I wanna
Oh,
clarify
yeah,
something.
go ahead.
You said without the overlay, there'd be 0 houses. I thought beforehand, if the overlay wasn't there for the map amendment, You still have that one there. You have
I meant the one,
One.
right, right.
Yeah.
We need to tear one down to put the driveway in.
But the other one.
The other one will likely stay, so that we would be stuck with just one. The one pre-existing home, which I understand is the one to the right, which I think's the blue house, but I'm not sure the color. Yeah, and if I misspoke, I apologize.
So the-
Um,
the-
I just
actually-
wanted to clarify.
Yeah.
Or, is it, or
Oh, yes.
Okay.
is it?
No, still, public hearing's open.
Well, no, if they had to tear down the one, is the other one, can that still be there, even without the map amendment, or was it
Yeah.
that where you're getting it, or?
That can
Okay.
stay.
Alright, yeah, no, I was just making sure that,
Less density.
Right, distance in between units, right.
Yeah.
A road can go in despite this map amendment or not.
Right. Well, it has to go through the proper permits.
Right.
Subject to
Yeah,
proper
I mean,
permitting.
yeah.
There's enough physical
And-
territory
yeah, and I
to
believe it's-
lay it out.
It needs to be state permitted, because it's a state road, right? The state has to so-
Right, and that's why
Yeah,
traffic's
I
a
just wanna
whole
make
nother
sure everybody
day.
knows that.
Yeah.
That as Bill mentioned, that the ability to put the road in can happen now, and the state, not the town does have some, a little bit, but if the state will give the approval on that because it's a state highway.
Right.
So, anything else on that? Anybody else? We're good?
All right.
I'd like to close the public hearing for application 2018-11. So, our next order of business would be action on applications, but application 2018-10, we're gonna have Barbara take a look at it, our town
Yes.
attorney, clean copy for next meeting.
Yes,
Okay, perfect.
so that, can we just state what that meeting date is?
Yep. So the application 2018-10, the text amendment will be continued over to our next meeting, which is Thursday, October 18th, at 6:30. All right.
That will not be a public hearing?
No, no,
There'll be no public comment?
correct.
Right.
Yep,
Just deliberation?
Yep, thank you. Let's see. So right now, next order of business is application 2018-11 for the map amendment. So I think we heard everything.
Yeah, it's just the map amendment.
Yeah, it's not that one.
Just the map
So this is just for the ARHD overlay. So, any thoughts? I mean, as Bill mentioned, that, or at least brought up, that the road can go in no matter what. ARHD being there, it does create, I mean, as far as the actual development, there's a little more space in between units. So it's a little more spaced out compared to the elderly housing. So besides that, they're fairly similar, except for obviously the acreage being applied to it. So if you want to take a little time just to look it over.
Mhm.
The only, there was a difference in setbacks though, right? The age
Well, this-
restricted is
A little
less,
closer.
it's a little closer than the elderly, right?
Right, but they're, yeah,
gonna keep
yeah.
it.
So for.
But, I mean, that's, for the concept, they're actually a little further
Yeah.
than what's required, correct?
Say that again?
The
It's 100
the vast majority are,
Yeah.
not
Mhm.
anywhere near, I mean, this one.
Right, and the distance between, so the other thing to keep in mind is that with this overlay, along Frederick Street, there is the red line shown here that shows a 30-foot setback, which is, a minimum. Sorry, so this thick
That
line
one?
here is the property
Oh, yeah.
line, and then this next line
Yeah.
would be the minimum setback. Along
that
this
one, okay.
portion though, those black flags are all wetland areas, which is why it's
More
easy
buffer.
for them to show you know, they're showing the concept of houses there. Also, this project would also have to go to wetlands,
Wetlands, yeah,
so
yep, okay.
that's the other, and that would be either concurrent with planning and zoning or before planning and zoning. What else is important to know? I had mentioned earlier, the overlay would allow, the main difference is it would allow more units on Route 22, Notch-Hill Road. Under the current zoning, you can only have 1 unit per acre. Each of the parcels that exist right now is under the 40,000 square feet, so the homes that are there are pre-existing, non-conforming. So they couldn't have 2 homes there under the current zoning, because it wouldn't meet. Under
Residential.
R4.
Right.
With the overlay, that can change. Could increase, obviously.
But we do have flexibility, I mean, we do have, I
Say
don't
on
wanna use the word flexibility, cause it's not, we do
Discretion.
have discretion and stuff.
Then, you've already kind of talked about all of this, but also under the ARHD, the distance between homes is set at 20 feet between units.
Whereas elderly is a little closer.
10. You know, again, that's a minimum of 10. They could have
Yeah,
more,
yeah.
but.
Yep.
So any,
I think, again, for me, I think the 2 things I heard from public comment were the road, but as we said several times already,
Let's
the
go
road,
in.
the road has nothing to do with this. It can go in whether we do this or not.
right,
Then
I
the
mean-
other point was, I think, very valid point, and we already discussed this, is we have discretion, the comments
Mhm.
about making this, turning this residential, you know, single-family house into this cluster of 6, but at the site plan, we have discretion to
Of how
think
many
about
units,
that.
yeah.
So, this is not, as we all know,
And the-
that's not set in stone, so that seemed to be the 2 main comments I remember from
And
public comment.
there was a main comment about the setback too.
Yeah, you're right, that's true.
Well, true with the setback, but also
So there's
as-
more of a buffer because of the wetlands.
Yeah.
Well, you get the buffer, and you also express with the AR,
Mm-hmm.
it's, there's more spacing in between the houses
Mhm.
compared to the elderly, if they're a bit closer together.
Mhm.
yeah, I mean, my main, concern is gonna be what comes out of the properties on Notch Hill.
Mhm.
So if you don't approve it, they cannot put it there. They can put the road in, and then they can only have the 1 house on the property. If we wanna take you know, if we feel that, we wanna take a look and see what else, you know, how we can, or how the applicant can work that out and see if there's a better fit and different things like that, then you would, with maybe some extra units, then you would, consider the ARHD. So, Bill, do you wanna do a motion and keep on discussing? I just wanted to get a feel where we were going, so, you wanna just do the motion, we'll keep on delivering after that.
Let me do the motion?
Yeah, please.
I move to improve planning and zoning application 2018-11. Petition of Munger Book Associates LLC to amend the North Branford zoning map, changing the parcels 239 Notch Hill Road, map 13, lot 20, and 245 Notch Hill Road, map 13, lot 19, that are zoned residential R40 to age-restricted housing district, ARHD, and a portion of the parcel at 50 Fowler Road, map 27, lot 45, that is zoned industrial I3 to age-restricted housing district, resulting in an overlay district being applied. Description of the meets and bounds of the extent of the parcels to become age-restricted housing zone is attached. This is map change effective October 19th, 2018.
Is there a second?
I second.
All right. So we can keep on delivering now. Seated for this is regular members DeFrancisco, Mace, Sienna, Galdenzi, and Dulac. Anybody want to start off? Any thoughts, any comments? What's your thoughts on it?
Yeah, we did put an extensive amount of time into creating that amendment, initially to AHRD, and it does align.
I
Go ahead.
personally, I feel fortunately, we have discretion at the site plan, because I think there could be great opportunity to make, as someone suggested, something quite nice leading into this, so it doesn't have, that's for the site plan, I know, but, clearly, this isn't locking us into anything, even though we're looking at a concept map. Showing sake, it doesn't mean it has to be.
Right. Is there any other discussion? All right, so this is a roll call vote, so you have to state your reason and the way you're voting. So, Bill, since you kicked it off, we started.
Okay. I vote to approve. I think it's consistent with the Plan of Conservation and Development proposed land use plan, map 5, which shows the parcels on Notch Hill Road being zone residential and the option for a parcel zone industrial I3 to be used for elderly housing.
I vote yes also, for the exact same reasons that Bill used. I don't think it has anything to do with economic development.
Trish?
I vote yes as well for, it does align with our regulations and it does provide a different type of housing in the town, meeting needs of different people.
I vote yes as well. Align with the reasons as Bill expressed, align with plans of conservation, with the map.
So looking at the map amendment, I think this is a property, and understand how it fits. Residential, industrial, good fit. At that part of what you're trying to do with development, the setbacks, everything, my only concern is Notch Hill Road. I'm seeing, you've purchased the 2 lots in between. I understand the road is important for marketing, selling, all that. But the density there, I know we do have flexibility on that to work with you and have some discretion. I just don't know if it's gonna be discretion of what I feel that would be no more than, 1, per property. So because of that, I'm gonna vote no. That, the application passes 4-1. So the next step of that would be the site plan.
Right, wetlands next, and.
Wetlands, yeah, but our next couple months.
Right, and we'll wait for your decision on the 19th on the.
Yeah.
Thing. And I'll work with.
18th, yeah.
With Carrie and Barbara to clean up the language and get you your final version.
Right.
Everyone have a good evening.
You too, thank you. Okay.
Can I,
We need to get all this stuff in there. Okay,
yes,
sorry.
yes,
Okay.
I was going to say, can I make a motion to amend the agenda to have for 2 items?
Somebody over here can. You're
Okay.
on the other side.
Oh,
You're on
so,
the
right,
other
that's
side.
right. So there are two items. One is an 824 referral that I received from the town manager after the town council meeting on Tuesday, which is.
Oh, excuse me, I just let you know, as far as the action on those 2 items, we're done for the night of that. Now we're just going into the town planner's report. So thank you for joining. You're more than welcome to stay. Carrie has awesome reports, so, she would really appreciate an audience on that. Usually everybody goes, as soon as we get
Right.
done with this stuff, they leave.
Now that we're on Facebook.
Yes.
Close to the public, or just public speaking, or we can still come in?
Oh, you could still come to the meeting, it's just that the public comment section, it was closed, correct. You could still come and we'll be deliberating on that. Yep, thank you. I'm sorry, Carrie.
That's okay. So, I received an 824 referral from the town manager, which is regarding the potential conveyance of land that the town owns to to, the land trust. So if we could amend the agenda to add that, that's the one thing, and then also amend the agenda for a request for possibly waiving the application fee for, a farm brewery application.
So we make a motion to
I
amend.
make a motion to amend tonight's agenda to add discussion regarding transferring town-owned open space at 55 Tommy's Path to North Branford Land Conservation Trust, and to, second, to waive the application fee for farm brewery.
I
Yeah.
second. Oh, you
Oh,
don't have
yeah,
a
I'm sorry.
second?
Yeah.
Oh, you do have a second? I second.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
Let's stay.
Passes 4-0, and Commissioner DeFrancisco abstained. I have to be a little formal. All right, so what do you got on the first one? We'll do Tommy's Path?
Yes, that would be great. And then we also should go back and do the meeting minutes before the end of the
Yep.
meeting as well. So, again, so an 824 referral is just the section of the Connecticut General Statutes, which says that before a town disposes of any land, it has to come to planning and zoning for just a review. So this is before, you should have a copy of this. So you'll remember there, was a 3-lot subdivision that was approved by planning and zoning at 48 Tommy's Path. As part of that subdivision, the commission approved this creation of a small portion of open space, which is about .4, it's a little bit less than half of an acre, 4/10
You're talking
of
about
an
between
acre.
the black line and the red
The
line?
hatched. So if you see, so this field here,
That's,
this was the 3-lot subdivision.
uh-huh,
This hatched area
yeah.
is the open space that was created as a result, so,
it's this yellow part right there.
yes, yes. So if you flip to the other page,
Oh, that's what you mean.
that's
Yeah.
what the commission had approved for open space. And then the larger portion, which is the dotted area that's outlined in red, that is owned by the town. And that's what the referral is for, because how this came about is with the creation of this, the open space, if you remember, it's a small piece. So there was discussion with the land trust, since the town is not accepting more open space because we have too much to maintain as it is. So the land trust had expressed some interest in that. However, they didn't want just one sliver. They were really interested in the
Oh, they wanted this whole
55
L.
Tommy's Path.
Yeah.
So I did talk with the town council, and now we have the referral. So there's
So-
some side.
So you mean this whole area in red would go to the land trust?
Yep.
Correct, yes.
Break
So
it
what
down.
is, so it's a referral, so we just have to vote positively on it? for the most
Correct,
part?
favorably or,
Right.
or oppose.
So would somebody like to make a motion?
So,
I move to.
here,
I move
there you go.
Okay, good. I don't know what I moved to do. I make a motion that the Planning and Zoning Commission report favorably on Connecticut General Statutes, Section 18-24 referral from the Town Council regarding the conveyance of land located at 55 Tommy's Path, owned by the Town of North Branford, to the North Branford Land Conservation Trust.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion on that?
Pretty straightforward.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
That passes 5-0.
Thank you.
I think I erred, I just wanna go back for a second. I think I erred when we did the map amendment approval. I think I said 4-0. I'm saying 5, I'm sorry, I did say 4,
you
yeah,
said
4-1.
0 on the brewery.
Okay, all right.
4-1.
Okay, I just wanna
Yeah.
make sure, 4-1 on the other one, okay. Even though it's, okay. So next part would be, you're gonna have, Commissioner DeFrancisco is going to recuse himself from this discussion.
So there was a request from Alex DeFrancisco for a new application that he is going to be submitting for a farm brewery to waive the town fee, because he had submitted the town fee for his special use permit for the distillery application, which he withdrew. So I had said that I would ask the commission. We would still have to charge the state fee because we can't waive that. We have to pay that for every application that comes before the board.
And this is kind of, we've done this in other instances, we waive fees for someone
Yeah.
pulled out
Yeah.
or reapplied,
Yep.
so, would somebody like to make a motion on
I
that?
say no way.
Somebody like to make a motion?
I make a motion to waive the
Town fees.
town fees,
Town application fees.
town application fees, but we cannot waive the state fee for farm brewery application. I didn't know if there were
Is
some
there a
numbers.
second?
I second.
Any discussion?
No.
Seeing none, so none or a hum?
A grumble.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none, that passes 4-0, and Alex recused himself from that discussion. Carrie, do you have anything else?
I do.
Oh, no, yes, we do, we've been.
I'm not amending the agenda again.
No, it's on the agenda.
Medical marijuana.
Yeah.
So I finalized the applications, on behalf of the Planning and Zoning Commission for a proposed text amendment for medical marijuana dispensary and one for medical marijuana, production facility. So I have applications 2018-13 and 2018-14. So I wondered if the commission could just accept them, and then we had talked about maybe setting the public hearing for the second meeting in November,
Yeah.
which would be November 15th. So that gives us
Second.
time to advertise, but also to get some notices out there so that if the public is interested. I've already reached out to Pam Johnson from the Sound, just to get a story going, to see if there is any interest.
Yeah, once you have the article kind of put together, I like to post it up on, like North Branford Proud,
Okay.
Facebook. Also, yeah, so,
So you just need us to
Yes, it's really just,
do you need a motion?
no,
Okay.
no.
We
It's
accept
just more of an announcement.
We are accepting, the two applications for, medical marijuana distribution and, production
Production.
facility.
And then, so we'll set the public hearing date for November 15th, which will be advertised. And then another application that I just received this afternoon is a proposed zone change on Foxen Road at 1071 Foxen Road.
Where's that?
It's next to Dollar General, which is 1111 Foxen Road. So similar to the Dollar General parcel, this parcel is split zoned, so the front half is zoned business and the rear is zoned residential.
Is it to the right or left?
Where's Dollar
To the right.
General?
It's to the right of Dollar
Yeah.
General. So,
So Dollar General's like here?
here.
Here, yeah, okay.
That's
Oh,
the
yeah,
left.
right, if we're
So
facing,
this is north.
yeah, for
south.
facing the Dollar General, so I
Right,
got
I see
you.
everyone, take a look at it. All right.
So
I got you.
the,
Oh.
the,
Is that where the package store is?
Yeah,
the
It's a
property
package store?
owner has,
Right?
yeah,
I
It's-
think so.
yeah.
the property owner has an electrical business, and he's looking to run the business, from that property. He wanted to build a new building, but he can't build another garage in the residential zone and operate his business out of it, because you can't operate a business out of an accessory structure in a residential zone. So he's looking at rezoning that whole parcel.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
Say he wanted to build a bigger, say he wants to do something like that. Could he first go to,
ZBA?
yeah, I mean, it's kinda, I mean, I
That was
don't wanna
my
say
first
what's a
thought,
hardship,
too.
but no, that's not my, you know.
Things like this.
But no, I'm just saying that something like
They-
that.
He could, but similar to, I'm trying to think of which property it was. I think it was the storage facility. When I first started up in Northford,
Right.
they went to ZBA, they got
Yeah.
denied, because they were saying, no, you shouldn't get a variance, you need to do a text amendment. So I think they may say the same thing, that you would need to try a zone
A zone
change
change
first.
It's cleaner that way.
And then if the zone change doesn't work, then you could claim a hardship. But a use variance is challenging. You really shouldn't allow them at all. Because it goes against allowing something that's prohibited in the zone.
Just wonder,
Yeah,
just
that's
asking.
that person.
So,
Right.
I'm not sure what the reception is going to be from this, but
When do you think that's when's that gonna be scheduled for?
So, November 1st for public hearing.
Okay.
Wait, so
No.
this red is business.
We'll have enough time to advertise 2 times.
The red
Oh,
is,
okay. Yeah,
so
yeah, yeah.
the red is business, here's residential.
Yes.
Yeah.
Is that arbitrary?
All right.
I swear that is
don't
arbitrary
like
just from this.
arbitrary.
I don't, because it's like somebody just was lazy, just drew a line down 80 and 17. I'm like, oh, we're
Well,
only
they
gonna go so far
measured,
back.
actually,
No, they-
it's not completely arbitrary, they actually
please tell me.
measured,
Because
I
it
forget
comes
the
from center.
distance, I believe it's 200 feet
From the center
from
line.
the center line.
So if the road was going to the right more,
Right, which
Yeah.
is,
because they
right,
can't,
which is why it cuts parcels,
yeah.
like
it-
this one only has one corner, you know.
So that's just like, it doesn't matter what land is over there, we're just gonna keep it consistent by following the center line, but
Anything else?
could be any direction.
No, that is everything.
We have the minutes still.
Oh, yes.
Oh, the
Oh, we
minutes.
gave the minutes.
I
Alex.
recuse myself.
I reviewed them.
Let's see, so who was here for the minutes? Let's see.
Francesco, Mace,
So,
and Duba.
it was me, Alex, and Trish.
Yep.
So if you already reviewed them, then, or Alex, did you review them too?
Yep.
If you'd like to make a motion then?
Alright, I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from September 20th, 2018 meeting.
I second.
Any discussion?
No?
Nope.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any
Abstain.
opposed?
Abstain. 2 abstentions.
Anybody abstain? Let me get there. It's after yay, nay, and then there's, okay. Hold on. I'm gonna milk this one now. Just for that, just for
Talk
being
slower.
interrupted.
I move
am-
to adjourn.
No, I didn't-
I
it's
second
okay.
it.
There's a motion on the
Passes-
floor.
it
We're taking over
passes
the
three-
chairman.
The minutes 3-0,
Out of
2
control.
abstain. I didn't even recognize a motion to adjourn yet, so. Can we make a motion? Have you, can we?
Second.
I can't do
I
more than one
move,
thing.
I move to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Oh, I need a roll call vote on that. I did not hear that.
reason?